Hey everyone, welcome. Good morning, good afternoon, good night, wherever you are. My name is Marilyn Shannon, and welcome to the Breaking Free Show. I hope you're all doing great, and I am really excited. I'm going to tell you why in just a second, but I just want to introduce Amnon. Amnon, say hi.
Hi, good afternoon.
How are you? You're,
Fine, missed you.
I know you always miss me. I miss you too. I took the
Oh,
holiday off, but I do. I miss you all the time. You doing all right?
well, you're back. That's what's
I'm back,
important.
and I never really go far.
And you have a great show coming up
And
today.
I have a great show. And I'm going to tell you what. You remember when I remember when I used to sit in the back seat of the car and I'd say to my parents, "Are we there yet? Are we there yet?" That's what I have been doing for the last, I don't know, I'm not a half hour since my guests and I have been talking behind the scenes. And I keep saying to Amnon, "Is it time yet? Can we go live?" And he says, "No, not yet." But this is going to be such a great show. I'm so excited. And I welcome you all to enjoy this with me because it is just going to be wonderful. So let me introduce to you my guest today is Tyler Knott Gregson, poet, author, photographer, Buddhist, extraordinary human. That's what he is. And he is prolific. And I love him. And here he is. Let me introduce to you Tyler. Hey, Tyler.
Hello, how are you today?
I'm
That's the
great.
best introduction I've ever had. Wow.
Really?
Well, I don't feel worthy of that.
Oh my God.
That was amazing.
And that, you know what? That's okay. It's okay, but you are like I was telling Tyler when we were just kind of getting to know each other a little bit that when I was reading his poetry, and I have always wondered what is it about poetry? I mean, I've never could understand what it is. You know, what it is that people were turned on by until I met Tyler. And that was before Tyler, it was his words. So Tyler, tell everybody who you are.
Sure. I am a 36-year-old. I turned 36 like 3 days ago. So 36-year-old, I guess poet and photographer, and I live in Helena, Montana, and I travel about half of every year, and I just kind of wander around and meet people, and I get to spend time with a lot of amazing people all around the world. And in my free time, I write a lot. Every single day, I write a lot. And so, yeah, I don't know if we were speaking earlier. I don't know if I'm a writer or if I'm just a conduit to all these words that seem to keep popping up in my brain, but I'm just kind of scrambling and doing my best to try to get them down on paper before they vanish.
So I have a lot of things to say, but just you just
Perfect.
said that. So when you say so do you get up in the middle of the night and write it down
All the time.
all the
And
time?
oddly, something that's been happening a lot lately that I don't really understand, but I'll wake up and my phone will be next to me and I'll have no memory of it. And there will be sentences or lines, or the other day, there was the first page of a novel that I'm going to write, and I will have no memory of doing it, but I'll wake up and there it is. And so it seems like it's gotten to the point with me that I'm writing even when I'm not fully conscious, and that's a strange thing.
That is strange. I would like that to happen to me. You know, I mean, really, because when I get these things, I don't want to do it in the middle of the night. But do you think it's a good thing to do?
I do, yeah. I've always made a rule with myself that if something wakes me up that has been rattling around in my brain long enough, I have to honor it and I
You have
have
to.
to at least take 10 seconds to jot it down, even if it's just the rough outline of what the idea was. Sometimes it's as little as 2 words rattling around in my head. And with the first page of that novel that popped up, it was one sentence that woke me up and kept waking me up. And I remember going to bed with that sentence, but then I didn't do anything with it. And I kind of broke my own rule because I was so tired. And then
Mm-hmm.
that was the morning I woke up and my phone was on and it was next to me in bed. And there was a whole page that I don't remember writing. But I figured if that's the way that my novel that I've always wanted to write pops out, if that's how it starts, I'll take it. If
I
I
mean,
can work while I'm asleep,
uh
give it to
huh.
me.
So it's interesting because when you were talking about doing the poetry, you said you do that in your free time,
I do.
right? So
Yeah,
you.
it just,
Uh-huh.
yeah, a lot of people ask about the process of it, and I always feel really guilty because there isn't one. It's just when there are words, I write them down, and if there aren't words, I don't sit down and force it. I don't try. If I write when there are things to be said, and it's if I don't feel like what there is in my brain adds anything to the way I feel or the way that I think it should be, I let it go. And I think doing that is probably the reason why writer's block so far has never been a thing that I've had to wrestle with, because I don't write in that way. I don't ever sit down and, like you see in movies, I don't ever sit down and say, all right, I'm going to write from 10 o'clock until 4 o'clock today and no distractions. I could never work that way. It has to be, like I said, it's more of a conduit than a conductor. You have to just kind of let it come to you rather than trying to force it out.
And you do something every day.
I do. I do at least 3 things a day, actually. Right when I wake up, I post a photograph with a prose caption, and then a couple hours later, I'll write a haiku every day, and I've been doing that just as a mental exercise. I think, gosh, maybe almost 9 years now without ever missing a day, 8.5, 9 years.
Mm-hmm.
And then later on, I will do a typewriter series poem, and that's been, I don't know, I think yesterday was like 1930 or something days in a row. So I don't know. Once I start something, it's hard for me to stop it.
So you do all these things every day, and you never plan when they're going to come. They just know, and they know they're going to come at some point during the day, and you don't, you just keep doing it.
I just keep doing it. And a lot of people say, well, when are you going to stop? What number are you going to stop at? Or how are you going to know what day to stop at? And honestly, I don't know that. There's so little investment for me on that, as far as I don't care that it's been 1930 days, and I don't care that it's been 8 or 9 years. If I woke up tomorrow morning and there were no words, I wouldn't write any words, and that would be the end of it. And that would be the day that it stopped. And so I have never put pressure on myself as far as, oh, you have to continue this. You can't miss a day because of this or that. You have to keep doing this. It's just been, there are words, and as long as there are words, I'm going to try to write them down.
So do you think, and maybe that's a hard question to answer, but do you think that because you don't put pressure on yourself, the words feel free to come?
Absolutely. I think that's 100% what it is. I don't know, I've seen over the last couple of years, social media has really changed the way that people share poetry. Mm-hmm. And I've seen a lot of people after I started seeing some, I guess, social media success, a lot of people popped up that were doing the exact same thing. And I was excited to see poetry start to be a thing again and start to see it get popular again. I thought that was really important. But what made me sad was I think a lot of people that were trying that were trying it because they felt like it was something that could lead to success. And they were trying to kind of control it rather than letting it come to them. Right. And it was really sad because so many of those eventually dropped out, and you stopped seeing them writing anymore. And it went back to, no more words. And I think that's the risk that you run when you try to control it, and when you try to think that you're, I don't know, bigger than the act of writing, or bigger than the act of making words fit together. And that's a dangerous thing. I think if you just let it come to you and be honest with it when it comes to you, it'll be a lot easier.
Yeah, it's a lot. I'm not in a box, so I don't worry about it either. And and I write the way I speak, and I make up words. So
do I. I do the same thing. One of my favorite words of all time is a word that I invented, and I'm petitioning actively for it to get added to the dictionary because I think it would be fantastic.
What word is it?
It's lullabylictic.
Okay. How do you spell it?
That's a good question. I think Lullabyl. ICTIC, maybe? Lullabylictic.
Yeah, uh-huh.
So it would be, to me, it always meant something that related to or sounded like a lullaby. So like a rainstorm could be lullabylictic, or the sound of someone humming while they, stir cookie dough or something like that.
Lullabylictic, wow.
I know, doesn't it have a good sound to it?
Oh my God. Lullabylictic. And that's the thing, sometimes you have to say the word.
You do.
Right? The combination of, for it to really have the meaning has to be part of the sound, right?
Yep. For me, it's always been like tuning a guitar. Until you pluck the string, you don't know if it's in tune. And there's such a tangible difference when you turn it up that half of a turn and you hear like the E string come into tune. There's such a difference between being just a shade flat and then right in tune. And same thing for
Right.
words. You say them out loud, you'll know if it feels right. And
Yeah.
that one felt right.
Right. And we have a caller, so I'm going to take that. But I do want to suggest to everybody, I forgot, I got so excited that when I was talking to Tyler, I forgot to tell everybody they can call in
Oh,
919-518-9773. If you like, from anywhere in the world, you can come in on Computers 2K Voice, if you like, and on Skype, and you can chat with us. And there's a whole bunch of stuff going on in the chat. So have fun. Just put your name underneath our video and come on in there. And so, hello.
Hi,
Hey, who is this?
Marilyn. It's Sharon McGregor.
Hey, Sharon. How are you?
I am good, thank you. How are you doing? It's
I'm
great to
doing
be here.
good. It's nice to have you. So did you, I see that you're on the chat and you love yourself some Tyler.
I'm trying to restrain myself.
Did,
I'm trying to restrain myself. Yes, I do.
there's no restraining here.
no,
Oh,
don't
thank
restrain.
God.
Go ahead. Tell us what you,
So, a couple years ago, I love the poet Pablo Neruda, and people know that. And one
Yeah.
of my friends, knowing that, sent me a poem of Tyler's. And I read it. I found you on Instagram. I found you on Facebook. And I started just following. And so your daily haiku I read every single morning.
Oh, that's
I
amazing.
also went out and got the 2 books, Chases of Light, and the words are yours.
Yes.
I could even barely just like breathe. I mean, they were so beautiful that I read them for myself. I create like this little space and I would sit and just read them. Sometimes I read them in the morning. And sometimes I don't read them for a long time because I see you on Facebook, on Instagram every day. So I am very, very impressed
Thank
with
you.
the depth of vulnerability that you have. And I think men, and this might be just my perception, don't usually go to the places that you go with such simple words.
That's an amazing thing to say. I think you're exactly right. I think it's funny too because we were speaking before, and I grew up in a family where my dad has been in professional baseball my entire life, and so my friends and my family growing up were baseball players from all over the world in any different number of cities, a different city every summer, and so I grew up in a hyper masculine environment. I was with baseball players from noon every day until 1 in the morning for 4.5 months out of every year. And I get asked that question a lot, is where that vulnerability comes from. And I never really know how to answer it. I think part of that comes from I was taught that vulnerability is an asset rather than a hindrance. And that's something I value so highly. And I'm so thankful that my parents had the courage to teach that because I don't know, I was never in a family where men aren't supposed to cry. And I think the fact that especially my dad was able to instill that in me, it's given the environment that he was in, it's something that means a whole lot to me. And I think the other part of it, honestly, is I'm on the spectrum. If it was still a thing, I would be classified as Asperger's. And so there's a lack of self-awareness with me where I never thought that being vulnerable and being willing to go to those depths was a negative thing. And for me, that I think in a million ways that set me free because it was I didn't know any other way other than diving into that depth and being willing to stay down there. And so that's something that I think will stay because I don't know how to be anything else.
Wow.
wow, being willing
I
to
think,
stay down there.
Yeah, I think that's
and
the key.
well, the thing is, it's something just clicked. It's because what I find is you put yourself out there. It's very real, and there is no hiding behind words, or every single word is impactful, but they're so simple and they're so pure. And I'm always, sometimes I have to like put it down and try to wrap my head around, could I be that vulnerable, and how is it possible? And when I saw you and I was like, oh my God, he's handsome, and he does all these things. It's like, wow, I can count the number of people like you, men or women, on one hand. So this is extremely rewarding.
Well, thank you. I don't feel worthy of any of that, but I really appreciate that. Thank you so much. And you
Sharon.
can. That's the key. Like the takeaway is anyone can. It's just you have to let go of this misconception that you're able to control so many things. And I think if you give in to that and you just let yourself go along for the ride sometimes, I think there's this pressure now that we have to try to control every situation that we're a part of. And I see it in people's work ethics, I see it in people's parenting styles, I see it in a million different things, that everything has to be so controlled. And there's so much freedom when you let go of that and you just let life happen to you sometimes, because I don't know, I think we work so hard to try to change our environments to fit what we need that we lose a whole lot of beauty. Whereas if we were to just step back and let things happen and then appreciate them for what they are, even the bad things, and I think that's the difference, is everybody's totally content sitting and steeping in really good situations and good pieces of their life. But then when the hard stuff hits, it's like, well, how do we get through this as fast as possible? What are the stages of grieving? What number am I at? How do I get through that so quickly? But those are just as beautiful and just as important as all of the good times. And we don't ever see like the 10 stages of joy. You know what I mean? Like, it's like, oh, you're happy, stay in it. But when it comes to the sadness, it's everyone's mentality is, well, how do we get through this as quickly as possible so we can get back to the joy? And if you change that and you realize that there's just as much to love and learn in the hard times, your whole life opens up, and vulnerability becomes the key to that lock. It's like the way that you get into that party. And I've always liked it there. So,
Thank you so much.
of
That was
course.
very helpful.
Well, good.
It's so interesting to listen to the two of you chat, and I was thinking of some of the poems that I read of Tyler's that come to mind so clearly. And I don't have a good memory. I mean, my memory is not as good as it used to be, and yet the sentiment that I received from some of your poems just relating to just what you're talking about now, I can put two and two together and I get this vision. Like, I know you wrote this poem about that we keep chasing the light, but the darkness is chasing us or something,
Yeah.
right? I mean,
Yes.
and I can't, and these visions, they're so simple and yet they stick with you
Well,
because they're true, right? Because they make
absolutely.
sense.
Yep. They're understandable
They're
and
understandable.
they are. And I think, I don't know, I've been doing this series lately called Seed Lines, and it's the line that started a certain poem for me, and it was what the genesis of that entire piece of writing was. And the thing that I found is my favorite pieces of writing from other people and things that I've read in my life all feel like a punch to your gut. And I think the reason that they feel like a punch to your gut is because it's somebody saying something that you have always felt but didn't know how to articulate. And there's something really profound in feeling understood in that way, because the reason why they take your breath away is because it allows you to think, if just for a second, that you're part of something so much bigger, and someone somewhere understands exactly what that feels like. And for how big the world has gotten and how many people have started to fill it up, it's still pretty lonely from time to time. And so to hear that there is someone somewhere that gets it, that changes everything. And even if it's just for 5 minutes, it changes you to know that you're connected to something that a lot of people might be experiencing.
Mm. You said something, and I don't know what it was exactly, but I wrote down you do not, and correct me. No, I don't know. You're not going to correct me, but you can add. I know you won't ever correct me because that's not who you are. I was going to say correct
No.
me, but tell me, you don't really allow your human. to get in your way.
No, I think it's all kind of intrinsic with it. I think
Okay.
I I I, I kind of just take myself. I've always done this. I kind of just take myself out of the equation. And
Right.
it sounds really cheesy and cliche to keep saying it, but like I've always kind of seen myself more as a conduit rather
Right.
than like a conductor on stage with the wands. I've always kind of it's always felt for me like the words show up in the back of my brain and they mean something to me. And my only job is to take myself out of that equation
Right.
and get it down. So, and I always figured that the place that it's coming from, I don't think that it's some supernatural, universal place. I think that it's just the the real voice inside me, and it's the heart of everything that I am inside me. That's where those words are coming from. And that's also why I don't allow myself to edit the things that I write. Because if I were to allow myself today to go back into a poem that I wrote 6 months ago and try to make it better, that is dishonoring and doing a disservice to the me that I was on that
Right.
day. Because I'm not that me anymore. And to steal that away from him isn't fair. And it's not my job. It's not. I always feel crazy when I go down this road, but it's the only way I know how to explain it. It's not future me or present me's job to influence the way that the past me felt. And it's not, there's neither are more valuable than the other. And so if I were to edit those things, even 5 minutes after I wrote it, I'm influencing something that was very real when I wrote it. And I can't do that.
No, you can't, and it may not be. So it may not be where you are now, but it is
Exactly.
where somebody else could be,
Absolutely.
right? And so it's right. I understand that, and that's a key for people when they hear that in you now is not to do that,
Yeah.
especially authors, writers, not to edit because the power in and the feeling of what you're feeling when you're writing something is so true in that moment,
Yep.
so key. Sharon, you still here?
Yes, I'm still here. Um,
I don't want to.
that is,
Go ahead.
no, no,
No, I
no.
don't want to forget about you. Go ahead.
Listening to all of this, and so many things are like basically like falling into place. I find that when I write, and I don't write for other people, I simply just write for myself. I am so embarrassed when I go back and I see my rawness. I I tend not to go back
Oh man.
because I'm afraid to see it. But I'm listening to you, and the perspective, it's like a mind shift. It's like at that point that I have no reason or right to judge me. In the past, that person was experiencing that in real time,
Yeah. In
a
fact,
version of me.
to take that even a step further, when you said that you used to get embarrassed, if anything, the only thing I would feel about that is pride. I think I would feel proud that I was that raw. And I would feel proud that, especially on the hard stuff, if I read something that I wrote that was during a really hard period and I saw myself raw and open and bleeding out on the page during that time, rather than being embarrassed, I would be really proud, especially because A, you survived it, and then B, that you not only survived it, but you transformed that sorrow or heartache or pain or whatever it was, you transformed
Wow.
it into something beautiful. And I think, gosh, that's something to celebrate. That's why I
Wow.
think going back is amazing.
That is an amazing. That is so. What you just said. So, every word out of. Okay. So many of your concepts that you were saying are so profound. Just in what you're saying. Forgetting about how you put it into imagery and into poetry, but just that fact that you, Sharon, that you could write something and be transformed from that moment from writing it, that the writing did something
Hmm.
and helped you be something or be somewhere else or experience something else is a powerful thing because somebody else will have that same experience when they read it.
Exactly.
And I've never
Wow.
thought of that either.
I've never thought about it that way. It certainly is a big shift that happens like it happens when I read your poetry so easily. You came to Raleigh last year.
I did.
And yeah, and I missed you, and I
Oh
felt
no.
like I missed. Yeah, I just had the
Well,
wrong
you
day in
got
my
him here
calendar.
all to yourself now.
I did.
Well, not
I
exactly
was
all to
just
yourself. You're
thinking it
sharing them
still
with
worked out
me.
for me.
This is great. Sharon, thank you
Yeah.
so much.
It was nice speaking with you.
It was so nice to have met you. It was really my pleasure.
And I'm around. If you need me, just shoot me an email or something if you ever need anything.
Ah, thank you. I
Of
appreciate that.
course.
Mm, wow. So, here's a question from Chris. Chris wants to know who you are writing to in some of your poetry. Is there somebody that you specifically are writing to, or what?
You know, I don't think I've ever written really to anyone. I think there are definitely, I mean, there are absolutely a million percent yes. There are certain people that show up in them more often, or that were at the heart of them, or that probably gave rise to a lot of the words. But I don't ever think that anything I've written has been aimed at anything. It's always just, the aim for me has always just been clearing it out so that there can be room for something else to take its place. And I think that's honestly why I'm so bewildered. And if you've gone to a book signing of mine, you know, like I'm always just kind of perplexed and flabbergasted that there are people there.
Mm,
And so I think that's part of why, is because all it is for me is getting it out of me. And
right.
once it's out of me, I feel better and there's room for something else. And even if that relief is 5 seconds long, because then it's replaced, it's just getting it out there. And so that's why it's always so humbling and amazing when people see themselves in the things I write, is because once it's gone, it's just a different, it's gone and it's out. And so, yeah, but absolutely there are people that show up over and over again in the things that I write. And
Mm,
I'm pretty I'm pretty private as far for having such a public persona. I'm pretty private as far as who I allow into that very close circle that I keep around me. It's very small. That I don't, and it's always been that way. I don't have a lot of friends. I have a few very close friends, but other than that, I don't have a very large net of humans that live in and around me. And so the people that do make their way in, I'm positive that they see themselves in the things that I write, and I would hope they do because they're directly influenced by them.
right. Well, they wouldn't be there.
Absolutely.
I mean, even if you're somehow making them up,
Sure.
they couldn't be there.
No, they couldn't.
And I understand, sometimes now that I have my first book out, when I forget to set, when I go to things, I purposely had to hire somebody, a young high school, well, not a high school, she's going to college, but she comes to help me because I forget about the book.
Yeah,
I just get into the people and the conversations,
absolutely.
and it's not about the book, but it is on some level because it's the way you can make money to do the next book,
Sure.
right? But it's more about the conversations that are created and the connections that are made. And,
Absolutely.
it's the book is just. So, with that, I want to talk about your book.
Okay. Perfect.
Wildly into the Dark,
Yeah.
typewriter poems. And Amnon do you have it with you? Because I gave a picture to Amnon. I have it, but. I know that it's going to probably melt into the background, so I'm going to get Amnon to put the picture up
Perfect.
because this is really an amazing piece of art and
Thank
of life expression. Oh my God, just amazing.
This was my favorite of all, and I have been so lucky to work with the whole team at Perigee who helps me put these books together. It's an imprint of Penguin Random House. They have been so amazing and so trusting. And on this one, Marion especially, my editor and my publisher, I'm so lucky to have her because on this book specifically, she trusted me to kind of craft it into exactly what I wanted it to be and put in the pieces of myself that felt more directly carved out of who I am than some of the other ones. And a few of those, I'm sure, as a publisher, they were risks for them. There are probably some sentiments in there that are not widely held and are not universally shared. Um, especially we're in a very divided time as a country. And so there are some in there that I think clearly take a stance and they take a side on that. And so for her to trust me on that, I didn't know any other way of making this book other than to just say, these are the most intimate and closely guarded things that I feel, and here they are. That takes a huge amount of trust. And so I've been really lucky because there's some in here about loss of family members, and there's death, and there is love, and there's a lot of sadness, and there's a lot of joy, and there's, I mean, even a little bit of political stuff and sex and life and everything. And so this book is a much deeper piece of me, I think, even than the first two. And it was really fun coming up with what filled this book.
How long did it take you?
Honestly, the longest was just trying to curate and figure out which ones and which ones felt the most honest and the most true. The writing for me, I always feel so horrible when people who are, you know, in a writing class or something ask me, well, you know, how long did it take you to write these? And I always say, however long it took my fingers to type them. And that's how long it takes me to write, is however long it takes my hands to get it out. That's how long it takes to write. But the curation process on this one was a while because I actually found myself with too many. And that was the hardest, was figuring out which ones to cut. There were a couple of cuts to this book that broke my heart a little bit. And I just kept telling myself that hopefully there'll be more books. And in those books, the pieces that I did not want out of there can find their way back to the surface. And I hope this continues because I love doing it. I really do.
Well, I was speaking to Tyler earlier, and I was saying about, I mean, it's like you want to savor them. You know, you don't want to. I didn't want to read them all at one time, and you know, I just want to kind of experience them. And I am new at, with Tyler anyway, new at experiencing poetry because, as I said, I've always wanted to like it, but I never knew how.
Yeah.
And but I mean, I've read so many, but there was one in here that I'm doing a book about 70, 80, 90-year-olds and their stories. And this one don't you want to face canyon carved? Just blows me away. Canyon carved.
Yeah. I've always thought that the people that understood the most about life are the people who had the deepest wrinkles. And I stand by that because you only get wrinkles from a whole lot of laughter or a whole lot of tears. And either side of that coin, it means that you are really experiencing the whole width of life rather than just kind of bouncing back and forth in the middle. And I don't know, I always think of life as kind of like a Richter scale. And we just had an earthquake here the other night that was a big earthquake. And I saw the printout of the way that the needle looked from that earthquake. And I remember thinking, that's what I want my life to look like. I don't want my life to be this bouncing needle right back in the middle. I would way rather have it be fluctuating wildly. I want days of stillness, and then I want days of insane shaking, and then I want to go back to the other side. And that's what I want. And I think the people who have those canyon carved faces are the people who have allowed themselves to laugh way harder than they should and cry way harder than they should. And that's where that comes from. And I don't know.
Do you see the image first? I mean, did you like have a flash of a canyon when you were?
I think actually, yeah, I think it all starts. I think you're right. I think it all starts with a mental image, and I think maybe that comes from photography. That's how I spend the rest of my life, is taking photographs. And so I've always felt that poetry and photography are kind of married together for me, and I use one to finish what the other can't finish. And so if I don't know how to say it, I take a photo, and if I don't know how to take a photo of it, I try to write it. And so with that one especially, I think I saw two things. The Grand Canyon has always been a huge, important thing in my family's life. My grandfather hiked it at least once a year up until the year he died. And then that love of that went down to my father, who, in a tribute to his dad, my dad has hiked rim to rim and rim to rim to rim multiple times in his life. And so the image of the canyon was definitely one. And then in a weird way, that kind of melted down into seeing the faces of those people I love with their laugh lines in the corners of their eyes. And if you shrink down small enough, even those laugh lines look like canyons. And so, yeah, that sounds a little weird and psychedelic, but that's how it is for me. It's that slideshow of a whole bunch of different things kind of coalescing into one thing that always kickstarts each poem for me.
So let me just again capture. He said a lot of things, but there's something he captured that touched me as well. Is that when the possibility comes, and it's going to come, that the expression isn't there, he'll do it with photography, and
Yep.
then or the words. So keep that in mind if you're listening to this and you're writing. There are going to be those times, and like for me, I'll go to a quote. I'll
Hmm.
find a quote, but now I'm going to find a poem by Tyler. I mean, seriously,
That's awesome.
because you like this. Okay, so like this one. Promise me you will not spend so much time treading water and trying to keep your hand above the waves that you truly forget, how much you have always loved to swim. Oh my God. How does that ring true?
Yeah. I think that one, that was number 61, I remember. And to this day, I sell prints of my poetry and sign them and send them all over the world. And I would say by a very large margin, I think that one is the most ordered of all. And I think again, it goes back to that thing. That is a punch in the gut because everybody has been there. And I would say a lot of people are stuck there. And I don't know, we go through life a lot more and more recently, I think. People go through life going through the motions, and they go through this life like just trying to stay afloat. And it's in that process, God, they're missing so much. There's so much more to it than just kicking by and, making a paycheck and paying the bills and watching the same TV show at night and waking up and eating the same thing. There's so much packed, even if that is your reality, there's so much that you can pack into that way, those waking hours. There's just so
How
much.
do you know all this?
I don't know. I've never known anything different. I don't know. I don't know if I ever graduated beyond being 4 years old. And I think that's the luckiest thing that's ever happened to me in my life.
Heck yeah, man. I love being kid-like.
Me too. Everything fascinates me. And I think everything is cool and beautiful and wonderful. And
Yes.
I mean, it doesn't mean I don't have days where I lose my mind and get upset and frustrated and whatever, because I do. I just got back from Connecticut and it took me 4.5 hours to drive 41 miles. And like, I don't care who you are. The Dalai Lama could be in that traffic and just be like, what is the point of all this?
You're right.
But I don't know. I think mostly I just kind of look at the world like it's just this really lucky miracle. And I feel so fortunate to try to dig out all of its little secrets. And there's a billion reasons to be curious and fascinated and feel alive.
Yeah, it's interesting. I have a friend who he's a crazy scientist. I mean,
Okay.
seriously, he's got patents on things that, people really do use every day, really saving lives, like things that are in emergency rooms, testing blood, keeping, cancer stuff. I mean, crazy stuff.
Wow.
And he wrote a book about problem solving. And I don't understand more than three-quarters of what he's saying. But you know where we meet? We meet in wonder.
Love that. I
That
love.
Yeah,
Yeah.
That's where we meet. We meet in that
So,
place of wonder.
yep. And I mean, you see that all around the world, and you see the things that bring people together. I mean, God, you put on a fireworks show and everybody believing every different thing in the world, everybody stands together and oohs and ahs at the fireworks. You know what I mean? You're right. You meet in wonder. I think that's the common language that everybody speaks. And I've noticed too, if you travel the world that way,
Yep.
it doesn't matter what language you speak. It doesn't matter what color your skin is. It doesn't matter what God you pray to. If you meet everybody you meet in every place you meet them filled with wonder, all of that stuff goes away. And it reminds me of my first trip to New York. I had some friends that were in New York before, and they were like giving me advice, and this is a bunch of years ago. They're giving me advice like, okay, if you ride on the subway, just like kind of look at your shoes, don't really talk to people. And they're like, just nobody really likes that, and you're not going to get hurt, but just leave everybody alone. And I just was like, what's the point of going there then? And I remember my first subway ride. It was a long one. It was from Brooklyn, and we had to go all the way, I think, to Times Square for something. And by the time we got off that train, I had like 7 people's phone numbers, and I was, like I knew everybody's name on the train. And it was because I got on that train and I was filled up with wonder, and people sense that. And then it feels like it gives them like a get out of jail free card that they can be filled with wonder. And then what do you know? Like people relate and they understand each other, and the world feels a little bit smaller, and I appreciate that.
Right, and that's the way that's how we get along.
It is.
That's how we get along. And so, do you do a lot of public speaking, Tyler?
I don't actually.
You
The only time I do anything like this is book signings, and I always feel like I'm just rubbish at it. So I just don't know. I just don't pay attention to myself very often, and so
you don't have to.
Well,
you don't have to. I can tell you, I'm a listener. I'm a freaky listener. I mean, really, I'm a listening freak, and you don't have to pay any attention to yourself. You just have to just be there.
Well, thank you.
Does that make sense?
It does, yeah. I think if I ever started listening to myself, or if I ever started trying to control that, all of that would go away. It's the conduit, not the conductor.
Yeah.
In fact, it gets me in trouble sometimes. I got to be honest. I have no filter in my mouth at all. And so sometimes I say things that I'm like, what? I see it later. I'm like, where did you go with that one?
I know. And I don't think it's necessary. I think because you're so deep and profound that you almost have this direct line, and you don't even have to hear it till it comes out. It's okay.
Yeah, I don't hear it even after it
have to. You don't have. I don't either. I mean, sometimes you'll see if I'm up on the stage somewhere, I might say something, hear it, and go, "Oi, why did I say that?"
Yeah.
Right. But then I realized somewhere it was, there's a quote that says, "Emotion travels faster than thought."
Oh, I love that.
And it's from the Talmud, from the Jewish, from a Jewish book. And I think it's the same that and I feel like you say everything, so much of what you say, and I have to say like everything, but you don't have to think about it when it comes. It's going to come. And even if and here's the same thing you said about writing. Yep. Like if you edit back to what you say, you're missing the point. I'm missing the point.
Absolutely.
Because it came out in a flash because somebody beyond us had to hear it.
Exactly. I totally agree.
Because you are so, you could write a book just on what you said during this show.
It's funny. My agent and I were talking about the direction that I might want to go on my next book. If I just want to do another book of poetry, and she's been so wonderful. Her suggestion was kind of what you just said. She thought not a self-help book, but a book that was more having people understand the way that I see the world, and trying to show them how steps that they could take to do the same thing. And I was really fascinated by that idea because we did this an online course a few months ago called Miracle in the Mundane. And we called it a life reboot. And it was basically just ways that people who feel trapped can get out of that cycle, and they can start over again. And even if it's for 15 days, which is what our course was, they can start over, and they can find those little lost bits of themselves, and they can shine a brighter light on them. Mm-hmm. And we had over 200 people that joined it. And I'm not exaggerating. Those people are family now, and they're with us and with each other. And the transformation that I saw in a 15-day period for those people was one of the most inspiring and humbling and beautiful things I've seen in a long time. And so I'm kind of kicking around that idea on maybe this next offering to the world in book form should be something about that. Maybe it should be kind of what we're discussing today, meeting in wonder and figuring out ways that we can all come back to that 4-year-old in ourselves.
Yeah, and you're kind of doing it here in this book on some level when you're not
Yep.
writing. I don't think that this is, I mean, when you write, for such a short time we are here, gifted years by silent explosions in the deep nothing of space. Is that a poem? Or is that
Yeah,
random thoughts?
those are just thoughts.
That's well, so you're already kind of doing it.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think I am.
You really are, so I just because you really have a way of quickly saying things already, and when so much I keep saying everything, but with what you're saying that forms such a connection and a picture and a relationship
Yeah.
for somebody listening.
Well, thank you. That means a lot to me.
Yeah, that's a gift.
Thank
And I
you
know
very
you
much.
don't. So here's the thing about gifts, like, it's ours, so it's hard to know it's a gift.
Sure, absolutely.
It's hard to know that when you take something so not for granted, but so kind of like your left arm or your right arm,
Yeah, it's just there.
it's just there.
Yep.
But you really are really good at it.
Thank you very much.
You're very welcome. So, do you have? So here's a thought that came to me before.
Okay.
How did you start? So did you just say I need a publisher, I need a this, I needed that, or did somebody suggest it to you?
No, it was suggested.
Yeah.
To be honest, I never thought that anything I wrote would go any further than my friends and family. The only reason I started a blog back in 2003 was because I lived 4 hours away from my family, and I wanted a way for the weird thing, because they always knew me as someone who had a bunch of weird thoughts, and so I wanted a way for them to keep track of the weird thoughts, and that was where it all began. And slowly those more friends would figure it out and find it, and then more of them would find it, and it just very organically grew. And then once I started sharing the haiku on Tumblr and social media, a lot of people started relating to those things. And so after they started relating, then they would start sharing it, and then a few more people would come in. And then I began the typewriter series, and that just happened. I never even intended to do that. I was literally wandering around an antique store, typed up a poem on an old piece of paper, and I was like, oh, that felt good. That felt really good to do that. And that began it. And within a couple of months of doing that, a few celebrities caught hold of them, and they shared them, and that's where it all began. And even still, though, I mean, about a year in, I still never thought anyone would want a book of this or anything. And I started doing that. My mom and my friend Sarah suggested at the time, they said, why don't you try selling prints of these for Christmas presents? Maybe somebody would buy prints of these. And that very first Christmas I did it, I think I sold like $20,000 of prints all over the world in a 2-month period of time. And my hand was exhausted. But when I got done with that, that's where I think people started saying, you might want to get a hold of somebody that can help you on this and figure out a way to maybe put some of these into a book. And down the rabbit hole it kind of went, and I met Rachel at my agency, and she helped me, and she said, let's throw it out to the universe. All they can say is no. Because at that point, there really weren't new poetry books on that scale coming out. Everything was small press, and so we tried it, and we had 3 different publishing houses all kind of throw their hat into the ring and bid on it. And I fell in love with Penguin Random House, and the rest is history. I never expected there to be a book. Certainly not, 3 poetry books and a children's book now. I never expected that.
Right. Well, you're easy to love.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, you're.
I'm sure it goes the other way too. I'm sure I'm really easy to be irritated with, but
Well, I know maybe. Well, I don't know. I think you're easy, regardless in the sea of things. You're easy to love.
well, thank you. I feel the same way about you.
Thank you.
Of course.
Thank you. I want to be one of those people that are
You are.
close to
You
you.
definitely are.
Yeah, I feel an affinity for so much of just just so much of who you are, what you're expressing, and I just, you know, I'm
Well, I appreciate.
grateful, that I saw that picture, that I was led
Yeah.
to Facebook in that moment and saw that picture with all those people because I'm like, who is this? I'm grateful.
I love that that is how this is happening. I think that's what's so magic about the universe is when a happenstance leads you down a different road and brings you to a new spot. That's the whole point of this thing
Yep.
is going down those strange roads that you never anticipate going down, and you never know how it can change the rest of your life.
No, and it's interesting. I just thought just now. I'm thinking, and it was a picture. So, and which is something you do so well in
Well,
being a
thank you.
photographer. And how funny is it that I would find that, you know,
Yeah,
found you through a picture. As,
sure.
Sharon is saying today is like her Christmas.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, that's
No,
what. Yeah,
that's
yeah,
amazing.
it's lovely. So I can ask you a million things, but our life together is just beginning. So I'm not
Oh,
rushing.
we got plenty of time.
Yeah, I have plenty of time. Why weddings?
Um, honestly, I don't have any. They were originally they were the only way to make any money in the state of Montana with
Yeah.
photography. And after we did the first one, my girlfriend Sarah and I did it together, and there is something pretty amazing. I mean, it's a very high stress environment and it certainly gets tiring, but there's something pretty amazing about being around a group of people that are all combining, all of their energies for what is, one of the happiest days of everyone's life. It is really hard to not have a good day when that's your job is to capture people having one of the best days of their lives. And I think about it in the panoply of all the jobs that you could possibly have in the universe. There are so many jobs that are so hard and that, you're with people on one of the worst days of their life. And to be able to just say that my job is to follow people around having an amazing day, that's pretty good.
Mm,
And it lets us travel the world and go to new places. We just emailed one inquiry back today. They want us to come to Bora Bora for a
haha.
few days, and it's like,
Wow.
yeah, what? Let's go to Bora Bora. And I don't know. It's hard to have a bad day when you're watching people be deliriously in love.
Yeah.
So
So, and when you do these pictures, do you see them kind of the same way you see words?
I do. Yeah, I very much do. It's funny because Sarah tends to shoot with a wide angle lens, and I think it's very telling and it's very interesting that the
Yeah.
lens I shoot with is the big heavy zoom lens. And it's because the photos that I end up walking away with are very small, small moments
Right.
that a lot of people without that zoom lens would never even notice. And those are the photos that resonate the strongest with me is like
Mm.
I don't know, the way that a hand is being held or the space between two fingertips when they're not holding hands. To me, that says so much more about the
Right.
relationship than pulling back with a big wide angle lens and seeing a giant tent set up with chandeliers and whatever. It's the little hidden moments. It's the whispers that they didn't even know I was getting from across the
Mm.
room. That's the story.
Yeah. You know, you ever hear? Have you ever heard of Dr. Temple Grandin?
I have, yes.
Well, I interviewed her a couple of weeks ago, right? And she was
Oh,
phenomenal.
I'm sure.
Oh, she was phenomenal. And she said one of the things one of my biggest takeaways was how we generalize things too much. And when she was referring to autism, of course, and how every autistic child is not the same, so we have to
Exactly.
dissect it. And I so see that in life.
Yeah.
And that's what you're describing now.
Yep. And that's, speaking of that, especially with the spectrum, that's something that I see every day is because that's a piece of me that has been there as long as I've been alive. And because it's, especially with autism and the spectrum disorder, because it's so generalized, people don't understand that sometimes being on the spectrum means that you go the other way as far as what you feel. And rather than not feeling or not recognizing the connections, you feel too much. And it's so much that I've always tried to describe it going through my life every day. Like if someone were to crawl in my brain for 24 hours, it feels like having 1,000 radios on to 1,000 different channels all at the same time. And that's what my life feels like. And I love what she said about generalization because it is so true. It's that's why with what you're doing with your story series, we need people that are willing to dive into that and highlight and shine lights on everybody's different story because generally speaking, yeah, we are all the same. But specifically speaking, we are infinitely different.
Exactly. And the only way we can be more of the same is by recognizing some of our differences.
Exactly.
And I have a quote, my own quote, and it says, the more united we are, the more independent we'll become.
Oh, that's
Right?
beautiful.
Because together we're so much stronger than we are apart, but we have these things between us that, are keeping us from really connecting.
Absolutely.
Right? And so, kind of like the Wizard of Oz, I want to kind of melt away those things and bring this stuff together. So, we are almost out of time. Oh, but for today, because
exactly,
I am just like, if you'll have me, I'm connected to you forever.
Deal. I'll take it. I love it.
So, tell everybody like where they find your books, what they'll find, everything and anything about you.
Sure. Chasersofthelight.com is my website. I think you can find information on where to find my books or all that stuff is on there. I need to update the photo gallery. Oddly, I still haven't updated the photo gallery on that thing, but you can kind of see how I see the world. I'm Tyler Knott, Knott, on all the social medias. Come say hi, and if you need me, I'm around and I'll help as best as I can, I guess.
Yeah, you're just being helps.
Yep.
And so we want to also give a shout out to Calvin and Hobbes, right?
Just Calvin now. We lost
Calvin.
Yeah, we lost Hobbes last June, and so it's just Calvin now. I know it was a bummer, but Calvin's still alive and kicking, and he'll be 11 in next April, and he acts like he's 2, but he's awesome.
He's awesome.
He is awesome.
Well, I'm sorry to hear about Hobbes.
Oh, it's okay. She was perfect.
She was perfect.
She was.
So in our final minute, can you leave us with some words of wisdom?
Sure. I think the only way I know how to live a life is to just never settle. And so I think the only thing I would offer up is don't ever settle for less than you know that you deserve, or less than you desire, or less than you're capable of. I think settling into things is the biggest trap that there is. And I think whether it's with love or life or jobs or whatever, don't settle. It might be scary and it might be murky and the waters are deep, but go for it, because that's where the joy is, and that's the whole point of this thing is to put yourself on the line.
Yep. And I would say just ask to be there. Ask for help. Ask for a hand. Ask to know. Ask for support. Just ask.
Yeah, just ask.
And if I didn't ask and I would never have asked for Tyler to be here, or Temple Grandin to be here, or other, just because there's more great people out here.
There is
than people realize. So
open yourself up to the whole width of life. Don't just kind of hover in the middle.
Yeah.
Be an earthquake. Be a huge earthquake of a life.
Yeah. What do you got to lose?
Nothing.
Nothing, and so much to gain.
Oh yeah.
So thank you, Tyler. Thank you.
Thank you. It was a pleasure. What a joy.
Yeah, it was just such an honor to have you. You are fabulous, and
thank you. So are you.
And I thank you all for being here with us and connecting with us and sharing this day with us. I look forward to having you again next week. And Amnon, thanks so much for everything.
Thank you.
And we love you. So we'll see you soon. Bye.
You are tuned to the Nissan Communications Network. If you tuned in too late, you can always watch each program in its entirety or download an MP3 audio file of it in the archives section at nissancommunications.com. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow us on Twitter, and like us on Facebook. Sponsored by Telestream's Wirecast software, StreamingGear.com, Carolina Apparel, and DeltaForce.net.